Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to move the motion that states that aware that Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, otherwise known as the Global Goals, are a universal call to actions to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. These goals build on the successes of the Millennium Development Goals in the spirit of partnership to make the right choice to improve life in a sustainable way for future generations. Cognizant that the Sustainable Development Goals provide clear guidance and targets for all countries to adapt in accordance with their own priorities and environmental challenges of the world at large. The SDGs are an inclusive agenda. They tackle the root causes of poverty and unite us together to make a positive change for both people and planet. They tackle root causes of poverty and concerned that as a region of Kenya record the lowest scores on the many development indicators and record high poverty incidence in Kenya according to Kenya Initial Rapid Assessment 2012. This House therefore urges county executive to put in place measures to integrate the Sustainable Development Goals into the county development plans and policies. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like first to thank you, the Speaker, the Office of the Clerk, and the House Business Committee for having given me this opportunity to move my motion on the floor of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, Kenya has got 47 counties, and the Mandera County is not an exception, and as Kenyans in all the regions of this world, we must also move in tandem with what the world all over is doing. Mr. Speaker, sir, if I may take this House through a bit of a historical perspective on what Millennium Development Goals are, Mr. Speaker, in the year 2000, the world leaders from 191 countries came together in New York, the head of the United Nations, specifically to tackle issues related with famine, drought, wars, poverty, and many other issues that is affecting the whole world. Mr. Speaker, sir, by then, a timeline was set. By 2015, some of these Millennium Development Goals were supposed to be addressed, and they came up with 8 Millennium Development Goals on 21 targets. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't want to dwell on the Millennium Development Goals because it's now overtaken by events. In September, Mr. Speaker, 2015, the world leaders again came together to analyze themselves to see whether the Millennium Development Goals were actually met, and they discovered that most of the targets were not actually met, and these world leaders, again, 193 countries, came together in New York, again, to chart the way forward on these chronic issues that is affecting famine, drought, wars, and poverty. Mr. Speaker, these particular issues the world is tackling is also the same problems that we as Mandera County are actually facing. Mr. Speaker, when these world leaders came together, they came up with 17 goals, 169 targets, and 304 indicators. Mr. Speaker, the World Health Organization Secretary General, in New York, the Secretary General, John Keane, actually said that we have no plan B as long as we have no planet B. What does that mean, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker said it means that all over the world, all the countries in the world and the people at large are equal in the face of the law and are equal in front of God, and therefore the issues that is affecting Kenya and Mandera County and anywhere else is the same, and it is critical and it is cross-cutting. Mr. Speaker, among those 17 goals that were drawn during that particular moment in time, that is 2015 September, they came up with a resolution that there should be no poverty by the year 2030. There should be zero hunger by the year 2030. There should be no person who is going to be hungry by that particular moment. There will be good health for all and quality education, clean water, gender equality, and many other agendas were actually drawn. Many other goals were drawn, and that's 17 out of 17 goals were drawn. And most of those goals which were drawn affect us either directly or indirectly as Kenyans, and it also affects us directly or indirectly as the people of Mandera County. Mr. Speaker, Kenya took part in that particular assembly, and they came up with 5 goals. Out of the 17, they decided to take only 5 goals out of the 17 so that they can be able to implement it fully by the year 2030. Mr. Speaker, among those targets that they have taken, goals they have taken is health. There should be health for all. They took agriculture and food security. They took employment and enterprise. They took education and gender. They took environment and its sustainability. Mr. Speaker, Kenya took these 5 goals to come and implement. Mr. Speaker, when the President of Kenya recently highlighted actually four key agendas for this country, and some of these key agendas for this country was health, manufacturing, food insecurity, and housing. Among these issues that the President actually has raised, these are the big 4 that the President is actually advocating for. Mr. Speaker, when you look at what the goals that the country has taken and the big 4 agendas that are actually adopted by the President, His Excellency the President, it actually affects us as the people of this county. Mr. Speaker, in the year 2013, this government, the Mandera County government, came up with certain objectives so that they can be able to meet by the year 2017. Mr. Speaker, some of those objectives were not met. And Mr. Speaker, I want to bring to your notice that when these millennium goals were drawn, the county government of Mandera has already drawn its objective and its target. So it was when it was on the midway that these goals came. Mr. Speaker, when I'm standing here, I want to show this House that the county government of Mandera has not actually aligned its program in line with these sustainable goals that the world leaders, Kenya being part of it, has actually said it is going to undertake and meet that goal by the year 2030. Mr. Speaker, Kenya also has developed Vision 2030, which actually accidentally corresponds with the world leaders' vision. Mr. Speaker, among those strategies that the Vision 2030 has is the political pillar, economic pillar, and the social pillar. Mr. Speaker, if I may just tackle the political pillar, we as politicians of this county, Mr. Speaker, have the responsibility to deal with the issues affecting the people of Mandera County. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about famine, drought, wars, poverty, these are critical issues which is cross-cutting, that is affecting the lives of the people of Mandera County. Therefore, Mandera County is obligated to actually align its program and its objectives and its vision and its core values in accordance with this Vision 2030, in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals, as I stated earlier. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, why do I come up with this motion? Mr. Speaker, one is to give a political and policy direction to the county government of Mandera. When these honorable members debate this motion, I want this motion not to be politicized. This motion does not know any political affiliation, has no political affiliation. It is a Mandera County motion, and I need the honorable members to support me in passing this motion. Mr. Speaker, number two, I want the county government to align to its policy to Vision 2030, to the Big Four agenda, to the Sustainable Development Goal, so that as a county, we want to have a direction where we can be able to move so that our people can achieve quality life by the year 2030. And also, Mr. Speaker, the county strategic objective are overtaken by events, as I earlier alluded. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to move the motion as it is before the House, and hope the honorable members will support the motion. Thank you. I now request honorable member for Takaba to second me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really rise, Mr. Speaker, to support this important motion. And Mr. Speaker, I want to just elaborate a bit, 1 or 2 points, why I need to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, I think the move of the motion has mentioned that this motion should not be politicized, because from the write-up, I could see this is a very important motion that will support members of the vulnerable society, like the poor people, from every corner of this county. And the other thing that the main core objective is really anchored, Mr. Speaker, in Vision 2030, MDG goals, and the flagship projects that has been actually relayed by the President recently. And Mr. Speaker, this motion, if it sails through, it is going to minimize poverty in this county. Mr. Speaker, we shall have also social sustainability. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is going to spur the economic growth of this county, and more so, it will alleviate poverty and hunger. And eventually, if we plan to roll out developmental programs that will mitigate environmental degradation, because as we know, most members, honorable members, Mandera is having harsh climatical conditions. And in some counties, Mr. Speaker, we have seen recently, even in the media, that they have rolled out climate change programs. And in line with that, Mr. Speaker, if we anchor all our objectives and our program-based budgeting on the social development goals, I think the issue of maybe problems of universal health care, education, poverty will be something past tense. So I would like to request the honorable members to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, for example, we had a Millennium Development Village in Dertu, in the DAP constituency in Garissa sub-county, and they started it from scratch. There was not even a mini hut there. But today, most of you have passed through Garissa-Wajir Road. You have seen Dertu is a product of MDG goals. And one of the pioneers who have headed that project is Mandera County product, Dr. Jimmy. So we have experts there who can roll out such programs. If we procure the service of such professionals, I really support and request fellow members to support this motion. Thank you.